Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark Devone. We'd like to say thank you and welcome to everyone joining us for the 100th time or the first time. We're so glad that you're with us this week. And we'd like to thank all of our patrons and Academy members who make this podcast possible. Yes. And this week, we'd like to thank specifically Liz Otterson, our new patron who joined this week. So Liz, congratulations. Congratulations. Welcome to the crew. And if you would like to be like Liz, you can pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and find out all the goodies you can get by being a patron and supporting this podcast. And if you would like to take your writing journey one step further, then please go to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com and learn about the Bestseller Academy, where Mark and I can become your coaches, your absolute coaches, week to week, month to month, helping you on your journey. So, Mr. Stay, you had a bit of fun at the London Book Fair last week, I hear.
I did. It was so much fun, actually. It was the last day of the book fair, so it wasn't as jam packed as it was on the previous couple of days. But that said, within 5 minutes, I'd already bumped into 3 people I knew, which was really nice. It was one of these things, saw old friends and saw new, met podcast listeners. Kate Baker was there. It was lovely to catch up with her. And then I did a panel on how I write with actually featuring today's special guest. We'll come to that in a minute, but also the authors Millie Johnson, Stacey Halls, which was really, really good. And that was packed. Absolutely packed, and it was great to play out to a sold out house, which was really good fun.
Yeah,
haven't done that in a while. Haven't done that ever.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. What were the kind of? Obviously we can't go into huge detail, but what would you say were the major things that came up in the How I Write, Q&A? Well,
I did about 4 times mention the 200-word a day challenge because this idea of writing every day, particularly if you're starting out, it's like learning your skills, flexing your muscles, doing a little bit of exercise every day. I think that people found that really, really interesting and inspiring, and everyone had their own different stories. Millie Johnson, who has been on the short episode, has been on the podcast before when she won her RNA award. She was so funny. She's such a laugh. She was talking about sometimes it's like driving in the fog, and you can barely see what's ahead of you, but you've got to keep going, got to persevere. And she was saying she once did a 26-hour writing stint when she was up against a deadline. She said people just sort of opening a door, throwing in a pie.
26 hours?
Yeah.
But without
crazy.
Breaking?
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's insane.
So,
I'd be curious as to what she wrote in 26 hours in terms of quantity of words and how it probably diminished towards the end per hour.
She did tell us it was tens of thousands of words. It was astonishing. But she's amazing.
I wonder if anyone's ever written a book from start to finish in one, and we're not talking short stories, obviously, because I know you could probably write a short story in one sitting, possibly. But I wonder if anyone's actually written a full novel, start to finish. I mean, it's a bit like, sure. Could you imagine? If you've done that, okay, we want to hear about it, because I know that someone somewhere is probably, it's like NaNoWriMo on steroids in some ways. Yeah. Could you imagine it? But maybe you've done 27 days of NaNoWriMo and not actually started, and then you spent the last 3 days writing your 50,000 words. But wow, that's incredible. That's exciting. But how lovely is it to be back out and meeting people and just experience socialization again? That's super exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, and there was a lot of hoo-ha, authors saying, should I go, shouldn't I go? And absolutely you should go. London Book Fair has Author HQ, which has, from morning till night, from opening till closing, just panels for writers with great advice on all aspects of writing. Gardeners are there. So, if you as we were talking a few episodes ago with Martin Latham about how to get your book into Waterstones, get it on Gardeners first of all. Gardeners are there to help you out. All kinds of supplies with, stuff on marketing and it's really, really, really a great place to go. And I know, like I say, I bumped into Kate Baker, who's part of the Bestseller Academy. And, what I remember her, she was saying she was looking at a publisher stall, because all the big publishers and small and indie publishers, and she said, I want to see my book on that shelf next time I come here, And it was that thing of and I said to him, Mr. D would love this. So that thing of visualizing that thing in the future, visualizing your book cover there, your book on their shelf, So Kate, I think, is one of these people who's doing everything right. So
absolutely,
only a matter of time.
It's really interesting as well because we talked about this idea in the academy of go to the bookstore and look at where you'd like to see your book, like where would it fit on the shelf, next to whose name. But I think going to a book fair is even more interesting because you're not seeing the end result. You're seeing the starting point, which is the publisher that you might sign with if you go down that route. Yeah. So I love it. That's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. And you finished your proof pages this week.
Yes. So I read them out loud. Now, as you know, I'm on a calorie-controlled diet, and I've got this app that monitors everything I do, and I've got to get my steps in, okay? So what I was doing...
Nice.
Right, I've got them on the screen here like this, and I was walking... I don't know if my cable was long enough. I was walking all the way from here and back again, reading out loud, walking backwards and forwards. You can only see this on the YouTube video, folks. Walking backwards and forwards, walking backwards and forwards. Managed to rack up quite a few hundred steps, actually. So
that's fantastic. This is it's like the writer's treadmill you've just invented there, Mark.
Well, it's funny you should say that. We had craft coaching at the beginning of the week on the Academy, and Aaron, who's one of our... Aaron is fantastic in the Academy. Great writer, great science fiction writer, screenwriter too. And, we're on the Zoom chat and everyone's got their little... And Aaron's was... couldn't see him, but I could hear him. And we had a question for Aaron, and he came up and he was walking around his apartment, with his iPhone, getting his steps in. Because, it's what you got to do now. You can't sit in your butt all day. You got to get those steps in.
I love it. There should be... I know you can get like standing desks, and I've seen a friend of mine who's got a standing desk with a travelator or a,
I think Joe Abercrombie has one of those.
Yeah, it's quite amazing actually what people can do now. I even saw one. I was very tempted. When you go on Amazon to buy something like a pack of screws, and then you see something and think, oh, that would be good.
$2,000 later,
exactly. But I saw this thing, and I thought this would work for writers as well. It's a set of pedals that you put your feet on under your desk and you just pedal away. So it's like I know, right? That's the thing. Because I thought, how much time do I spend actually sitting? And so it's like an exercise bike, because I've made a pact with myself, Mark, joining your kind of goals as well. I made a pact with myself is that my one pleasure in life outside of, all the other things I do, but when I take time off, the one thing I do is I love to watch the football. A lifelong Liverpool fan, and so very happy right now. But I've moved an exercise bike that I used to have in the garage. I've moved it into the living room, and it looks an eyesore, but I don't care, because the deal is that I have to be on that bike for at least the first half. And I've noticed that, as the game gets exciting and Salah's running up the pitch, I'm going like crazy. So I've really got into that, and I love it because it gets I've got my little kind of watch that I'm looking at my steps. But I thought all those hours that we spend sitting at our desk, this little device sits under the desk, and it's like a kind of a pared down exercise bike. And I'm curious, okay, writers out there, do you have one of these devices? Is it worth buying? And should we be getting one and pedaling like mad as we write?
What you need to do is somehow wire it up to the battery on your laptop or the power cable on your desktop.
Yes.
And you only get electricity if you're pedaling.
or it's a bit like that Write or Die app that we have, where if you stop typing, it starts to delete your words. And,
I hate that.
And what could happen is if you stop pedaling, you start to lose power on your laptop, and you would lose all of your writing if you don't keep it up. That would be good. There you go. There's an idea for someone out there. Brilliant stuff. Excellent. Well, tell us what your... this is a very important thing, because we always remember those mental health episodes that we did. Do you remember that, Mark? A few seasons ago, and there was a huge response to that. And I think it's important that we start focusing a bit on health, exercise, and writing, because the two are very incompatible typically. So send us in what you do to keep fit. Do you have like a routine where you religiously go out for a walk on the hour every hour when you're doing a long writing session? Do you exercise before you write? Do you get your kind of creativity going? Tell us what you do, because we'd like to just share your stories with everyone and inspire everyone to get out there and get fit.
On this panel at London Book Fair, we were talking about this very thing, because Millie Johnson does the ironing, and Stacey Halls was, talking about doing the dishwasher and I'm the same. We were talking about maybe starting up our own author household services company. You turn up one day and you get Millie Johnson turn up and say, I'm blocked. I'd like to do your ironing. So.
Or you could just do, like, if you're into dictation, you can do ironing for other people whilst you dictate. Just make sure that you have a quiet room to do it in. Brilliant. I love it. That could absolutely work, couldn't it? Absolutely work. Yeah, but also, I'd like to say hello to everyone that's listening to us who's currently on a walk. Because what I've heard, Mark, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, a lot of people like to listen to this podcast whilst they're out on their daily walk. Yeah. And, so hello if you're out and taking all that lovely fresh air in. And hopefully you've got a day like we have today in Vancouver. Beautiful summer sunshine. Maybe we were getting up to about 12 degrees, but like 2 days ago, we had 6 inches of snow and minus 2. I just honestly can't. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, let's something we do know that's going on is an incredible guest that we've got today who's had the most amazing career. I was blown away listening to his story. Wow, this is absolutely brilliant. Tell us about Tim Sullivan, Mark.
Well, Tim Sullivan was on that panel at the London Book Fair with us, and he was so much fun. Tim is a critically acclaimed TV and film screenwriter whose credits include Jack and Sarah, which he directed and we talk about, Cold Feet, and My Little Pony, A New Generation. That's range, people. That's a writer with range, and we do talk about that as well. Tim is now a self-publishing phenomenon whose best-selling titles, The Dentist and Cyclist, were downloaded over 200,000 times before he moved them over to a traditional publisher, Head of Zeus. The latest release in this series, the DS Cross series, is The Patient, and it's highly anticipated, features the eccentric and socially awkward but brilliantly persistent DS George Cross. We discuss why honesty is essential when you're a writer, his extraordinary career as a screenwriter, and why the character is more important than the crime.
Brilliant stuff. You're going to love this interview, folks. Have a listen in with Mark speaking with the absolutely lovely Tim Sullivan.
Tim Sullivan, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm very good too, thank you. And there's so much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to this. But first of all, tell us about your latest novel featuring the character DS George Cross. Tell us about The Patient.
The Patient's the third in a series of books, police procedurals I've written about DS George Cross. I think he's a wonderful character. He's very idiosyncratic. He's quite difficult, can be rude, but he's very dogged in his pursuit of the truth. And this is because he's on the spectrum. He's got what used to be called Asperger's, but we can't call that anymore. We call it autism spectrum condition. So he's quite he can be quite antisocial. He can come across as rude, but his condition is his gift. And he never sees things just as they are. He will interpret things in a way that's based entirely on fact. He never has gut instincts. He never liked someone for a crime. He just deals with what's in front of him, which makes him so unique and frustrating in the sense that if they get the wrong person, and he's actually provided them with the evidence and the arrest, and then he doesn't think that it all stacks up, he'll work against himself to prove himself wrong. So I love him, and readers seem to like him.
Absolutely. And you're 3 books in now. And how is the character evolving over those 3 books? How is he changing?
Well, he's changing a bit in that he's got a new partner. I mean, the 2 main relationships in his life are his father, who is an engineer, and who he meets twice a week, and his detective partner, Jo Ciotti. And she was very reluctant to partner him at the beginning because she found him so difficult. But she's come to appreciate how brilliant he is, and how once you get beyond the kind of the kind of exterior, you see how extraordinary he is. And in a sense, she becomes his sort of interpreter to the department. She becomes his interface. And so for his part, the way he's developing is that she does tell him that she tries to to bring him on with social conventions. So when they're going to break bad news to, a parent or whatever, not to just blurt it out as a fact, which is what he has a tendency to do. So they've worked it that she will always break bad news and he will let her do that. But at times he just can't help himself because he's just got to get to the point. And so he's learning a little bit about communication. He has this thing where he's fantastic. He's not great with emotions. He's not terribly empathetic. He has to learn about people's facial expressions because they don't register with him. So he built up over time a library of facial expressions that he knows what they mean. It's like a language. And so he's become very good at reading suspects and fantastically good at interviews.
When writing about characters with autism, and it is, as we know, it is a spectrum, what kind of research did you do? Is this something that's close to you, or is it something that you had to discover?
Well, I have friends who I think are probably autistic, and I have friends who certainly have autistic children, some profoundly autistic and some what you would say sort of high functioning. And it's something that's always intrigued me because I think it's been very misunderstood. And it just looking back in crime fiction, I came to realize that great characters like Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin, like Sherlock Holmes, Christie's Poirot, we'd all look at them now and say that to some extent they were on the spectrum. So that really got me thinking as to, I want to put it firmly center in the center of my books. So I did about 2 years research. I read an awful lot. I met with certain world-leading experts, trying to get to understand it because I didn't want to misrepresent it and I didn't want it to be a gimmick. I didn't want it to be like Morse's Jaguar. This is who my character is, and it's got to be honest. And I've had a lot of great feedback from people with relations with autism spectrum condition, and I even had from an employer in America who said, we've got an employee who's completely brilliant at what he does, but it's really difficult to work with him. And I've just read your first book, and it's my employee. So I've just bought 10 copies and I'm giving it to everyone in the company to say, read this book and you'll understand a bit more about whoever this chap was. And that to me was a really huge compliment.
Wow, that is extraordinary. Talking about extraordinary, let's talk about your career, because your journey to this point is something else. And let's go to the beginning, because from what I can find, we've had a lot of ex-lawyers come on the podcast, and they've become lawyers and then they've become authors. It seems like you became a screenwriter to stop becoming a lawyer. Isn't that your father wanted you to be a lawyer? Is that correct?
My father was incredibly frustrated not being a lawyer, which wasn't my fault. And he decided that he was an academic, that as he hadn't become a lawyer, his son would become a lawyer. My sister was already a lawyer. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. And so in my final years at university, in my second year, he stopped me from reading English and made me change the law. And he did this by withdrawing my grant. And it was like really contentious. We didn't speak for ages. But the irony was I then had to do an additional year at university because I had to do the law degree in 2 years. So I was a bit miffed at doing, 4 years at university instead of 3. But I was directing a lot of plays. I made my first short film on 16mm. And then weirdly, in my 4th year, a friend who was a mature student said to me, look, I've got a couple of mates coming up from the advertising agency in London and they want to have a look around the town. Can you show them around? I went, yeah, sure. He said, yeah, I'm busy. So I started showing these two people around, introducing themselves as David and Hugh. And we walked around and I was showing them various colleges and stuff. And I said, what is this film that you're, hoping to make? Oh, they said it's called Chariots of Fire. and I then ended up casting all the extras in the Cambridge sequences, which then led inexorably to how my film career started. And weirdly, my father had arranged pupillage for me because he had contacts, and we didn't speak for months because I left university. I signed on the dole. I managed to find the director, Derek Jarman, who had just made The Tempest, wonderful film. And for some reason, he took a shine to my writing. And I started writing a film script for him. And kind of that's how I got started. Was that the question?
So David and Hugh, that was David Putnam and Hugh Hudson. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Who then went on to win, all sorts of awards for Chariots of Fire. And Derek Jarman, this is extraordinary because Jarman was already well established, and he is one of this country's greatest filmmakers, and an artist as well, I think. And how do you get someone like Derek Jarman? Because he commissioned a screenplay from you, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He. I don't know. I got to meet him, and then I sort of hung around with him for a few days. He had he was like a Pied Piper, He always had young people in tow behind him, and he had shows, Super 8 movies in his flat in Charing Cross Road that he had made with wonderful orchestral music playing alongside. And I told him I wanted to get into the film industry, and after about 4 or 5 days, he said to me, "Tim, I can't help you. I don't think this is going to work. I think you're going to do really well, but there's nothing I can do to help you." I went, "Okay." And he said, you've got my phone number. You can always call me. If I can help you, I will, but blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so about a week later, I get a phone call from him, and he was writing a movie script with another young writer called Lee Drysdale. It was called Neutron. And they were having trouble with it. And it was for David Bowie and Stephen Burkoff. And it was going to be set it was a post-apocalyptic sort of horror movie set in Battersea Power Station. I mean, it was fabulous. Anyway, they sent me the script, and it arrived on a motorbike. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Here I was a few weeks out of university. Anyway, I read this script, and the first time I read it, I thought, I don't think, draft 14, I don't think I understand this. I better read it again. So I read it again. And then about the fourth time, my girlfriend at the time said to me, "What's the problem?" And I said, "I don't think it's very good." And she went, "Well, presumably that's why they're still working on it." I went, "I know, but I can't go in there and say, who am I? I can't." Anyway, she said, and she gave me a piece of advice that I've always, sort of stuck to since. She said, "You've got to be honest. If you start lying now before you've even started, where are you going to end up?" So anyway, I went the next day to Derek's flat, and there was Lee, all kind of bouncy, tiggerish, and kind of wanting to get on with it. And Derek said, "You type." And there was an old Olivetti. So I sat down and I thought, what am I going to do? And then after about 10 minutes, I stopped and I said, "Look, I'm really sorry to stop you, but I've got to say this. And when I've said it, I'm going to go. So you needn't worry about what I say. Please don't get cross." And then I just told him what I thought of the script, and it went on for about 25, 30 minutes. And at the end of it, Lee jumped up, and I thought maybe he was going to attack me. And he said, "He's absolutely right. Everything he says is absolutely right. Why hasn't anyone told us this before?" And so I then got involved in rewriting that with them. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, Derek said, "I've got this idea for a movie about a walled up anchoress, medieval silent movie. Will you write it?" Yes. So that was how that happened. He was a remarkable man, Derek, because he was hugely encouraging of young talent in an extraordinary way. So many people, Sandy Powell, the costume designer, Tilda Swinton, it's John Maybury, so many people owe their beginnings to him. Mm-hmm. He took a chance on so many people, and he took a chance on me.
Fantastic. And that you then moved on to writing in television. You got a lot of television credits. And then I saw you got your first credit as a screenwriter was A Handful of Dust, which is an Evelyn Waugh adaptation.
Yeah.
But then you got to write and direct your debut movie, which is Jack and Sarah, which I love, is a wonderful, wonderful film. And in these troubled times, if you want, a warm hug of a movie, listeners, check out Jack and Sarah. And it's got Richard E. Grant, Samantha Mathis, Judi Dench, Eileen Atkins, Sherry Lungi, Imogen Stubbs, Ian McKellen. What a cast. How did that come about?
Well, I was working at Granada, and I'd been on their trainee directing scheme, which was a very famous scheme that people like Michael Apted and Roland Joffrey came out of. And I directed Coronation Street. I directed Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett. And the director of programs, a chap called Steve Morrison, came up to me one day and said, I know you're going to lead this company. You're going to make a movie. And I'm going to kick myself if we're not involved. Have you got a film? And I said, well, yeah, I have actually. So he sent me to see the head of film, who at that time was Pippa Cross, and I pitched this movie. And 2 years later, we made it, and I thought it was a great script. I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time. I think I'll cringe probably, but I would change things now. But it attracted the cast because they loved it. And yeah, it was just a wonderful, wonderful film to make. And it was weird because it became my calling card for the US. But in a weird way, I was then approached with films that were in trouble, scripts that were in trouble, because I was a writer-director. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly you'd be attached to these $40 million movies to rewrite and direct. And then you'd rewrite them, which would take a couple of years, maybe a year. Then you'd try and cast. And then the foreign sales or whatever didn't improve your cast. Mm. And, within 6 or 7 years, you've been attached to like 3 of these projects and you haven't made a film, but you have become a Hollywood screenwriter. Mm. And you can't hold your hand up and go, whoa, wait a minute. I want to make these films, because it doesn't always work like that. But listen, I'm very grateful. Mm. It's been a great path.
It is one of those extraordinary things about being a screenwriter, is you can actually earn a good living and not ever get anything made. Sometimes, it's a very, very strange.
Well, this is what led me to write the books. Right. I was talking to Lee Hall a few weeks ago, the screenwriter and dramatist, and he came up with the same figure that I'd independently come up with in an article. He said the thing about screenwriting is it's 80% of your work is never seen. It might be paid for, but in the old days, it used to end up on a dusty shelf of some executive's office in Hollywood, but it doesn't even get that far now because it's on a hard drive. So it doesn't even exist. And it's incredibly frustrating because I spent a year on Shrek 4 working for Jeffrey Katzenberg, which was a wonderful experience. Came up with a really good plot about Shrek going to look for his father, who's going to be played by Sean Connery, and Shrek had quintuplets, which the marketing people just loved me for, at the end of about sort of 8-9 months of really, really hard work, they brought in the director, who just decided to remake It's a Wonderful Life, wanted to make a totally different movie. And in that situation, when the director comes in, they bring their own writer, and it's the way it goes. So great experience, fantastic working with Jeffrey. But at the end of it, you've got a file on your computer.
Wow, that is extraordinary. But yes, let's talk about the move from screenwriting to novel writing. And The Dentist, this is amazing. It reached number 5 in contemporary British fiction category on Amazon when it was first released. But when you put it out for free, put it on the free list, it spent over 10 weeks at number 1 in the crime category. What inspired you to start writing fiction?
I just want to say, in both the US and the UK, let's just make that clear, the number 1. It was a couple of years ago. I was sitting exactly where I'm sitting now, and I'd just finished work on My Little Pony, which I co-wrote and co-produced, which was a great experience in Ireland and LA. And I was sitting here, and that film had kind of finished, and the pandemic happened. And suddenly people weren't commissioning. And I had a couple of spec scripts that I was working on. And I just thought, I've always wanted to write a book. I've done this research into this character, that I thought was maybe going to be a movie or a TV or something. I've done all this research. I'm going to see if I can write a book. And then I thought, I can't be bothered with going through all that stuff, with showing it to an agent, showing it to a publisher. In fact, I showed it to my agent, my literary agency of 30 years, and they turned it down. And I just thought, oh, there's loyalty for you. And then I thought, nah, I can't be doing with this. I did a course on self-publishing, and I said, I'm publishing a book in July. which was pretty frightening, bearing in mind there wasn't a word on a page. I commissioned a wonderful cover designer because that's so important. And I set about writing, and then I sent it to a friend who's a prize-winning novelist and teaches writing. And I said, look, have a look at this. If it's good, great. If it isn't, just let me know and I'll stop. And a couple of weeks later, this email came, and I won't quite say what it said, but it started quite colorfully and then said, you should continue. And, doing the self-writing, the self-publishing course, the secret really was that you have to have 2 books, essentially, ready. And it's best, and if they're in a series, it's even better. And so what you do is you publish the first one, you sell it for a while, and it gets reviewed. And mine got lots and lots of reviews. And then it's a real kind of odd thing because it's making some money and you're in debt from your advertising and whatever. And you suddenly make it free and you stop advertising. But in the back of the book, it says there's a second book coming out in September. And then the book just took on a life of its own. I mean, it just went tonto. It was picked up by Barnes and Noble in the US, and it became their free Friday book of the week. Then The Cyclist was picked up as one of the must-read 25 books of the fall of 2020. So it was kind of amazing. And, The Cyclist had 1,000 pre-orders but before day one, which for a self-published author for book 2. And what people have to understand is if you sell a book for $2.99 on Amazon, you're going to get £2.10 of that. So, you're already at £2,100. And so I felt confident, and I was getting such great feedback about the character. The character is what everyone has kind of responded to. And that's so important in detective fiction. The character is more important than the crime every time. And then my wife said to me, so I was keeping a log of the figures, and after 4 months, I'd had over 200,000 downloads. And I didn't really know what this meant. I had no idea. And she said, she's a TV producer. And she said, I don't know either, but I think it's probably pretty good. Because, even if you put a free book out there, and, a lot of those books were being sold as well. Putting a free book out there are thousands of free books published every day on Amazon. It's to get it seen and downloaded and read. So she said, I think you ought to get some PR. And so I approached a very big book PR company. And they took a look at it and then called me up and said, our chief executive has just started up a literary agency. Can we show it to him? And I went, no. And then, why not? I said, look, I'm doing really well. This is great. I'm having a really good time. I'm in charge. I do my own advertising. And they said, but you're not getting any PR. And I said, that's why I've come to you. And then I went, no, you should be properly published. So in the end, to cut a long story short, I signed up with this agent and he got me a book deal with Head of Zeus, which has been great.
Fantastic. What incredible story. And how long before we see DS Cross on TV or in the movies? Is that no?
The beauty of writing books and the beauty of coming from that background is I'm not even going to worry about it.
Right.
If someone, I'm not interested in, if someone comes to me with a broadcaster and says this broadcaster wants to make this book, then great. But I'm not interested in just selling the rights for the sake of it. It's pointless.
Excellent. I just want to go back to My Little Pony. Because I was looking through your IMDb, and we've got Sherlock and we've got Cold Feet and we've got, Jack and Sarah, and there's My Little Pony. How aware were you of the phenomenon of My Little Pony and the bronies and everything else that comes with it? What sort of was that part of the adventure for you, doing something so different?
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, I'd worked on a movie many years ago called Flushed Away for Aardman.
Watching it just the other day. Yes.
Oh, really?
Really
yes.
enjoyed it. Yeah, I love that film.
I've got an additional, I worked on that for about 4 months. I've got an additional material credit on that.
Right.
And then the producer of that phoned me up. Oh God, when was it? 2019, I think it was. And she said, Tim, I'm working on this movie in Dublin. She's from America. and we need a bit of help with it. So would you be willing to look at the script? And I went, of course, She said, it'll only be a couple of weeks, it's just in a bit of trouble. And we know, you can turn the script around and blah. So we carried on talking like this. And then she said, so it's My Little Pony. And my response was, okay, Cecil, it's Tim Sullivan you're talking to. Yeah. Okay. So it's like, I know I've done animation before, but it's not like, anyway, I went over and it really did need a lot of work, and the directors were wonderfully responsive. And we just turned the whole thing around, and it was a wonderful adventure. We got themes in there that we thought would just be sort of undercurrents that would hopefully, children would understand subliminally. But all the critics picked it up. It's about racism. It's about propaganda. And so it was a great experience. And I didn't know much about the brand. My children and my daughters had had them. But, it was a really interesting time because they'd made a movie before which hadn't done very well. And they wanted a reboot. So we had new characters, 5 new characters. But you are essentially working alongside a toy factory. Mm. And that's kind of, there are interesting tensions there about what you're doing and about what they're doing. And, one of my big things, which I think it's not original, but, I'd often be told, look, a 5-year-old is not going to get that joke. And my answer is, yeah, but the bored adult sitting next to him is. Mm. And you've got to get that balance right. But it went really well. Unfortunately, it went straight to Netflix because of the pandemic. Yeah. And it was a Paramount movie. And I saw it in a big screen with kids. And oh my God, the directors did such a fabulous job. And it just looked amazing on the big screen. But when Paramount went to Hasbro and said, look, can we move this, to when, people are back in the cinema, they said no, because they had billions of toys around the world in factories that were set for that date. So it's a totally different consideration. But it all worked out well because Netflix bought it, and now there's going to be a spin-off TV series off the movie. So
wow.
So it worked out in the end.
Just to say, I don't want to make you feel old or anything, but talking about inspiring children, but the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes TV series got me into Sherlock Holmes in such a big way. I devoured every single word of Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books because of that TV show. So thank you very much for that. You inspired me. So
it's a pleasure. It's not as bad as I went to see the head of the BBC drama once in a meeting. And it was the first time someone had really made me feel old. Here I am with the head of drama, and he's younger than me, and that's fine. And I'm sort of talking to him generally about work we want to do. And he goes, I've just got to stop you. I've just got to say that I am such a fan of your Sherlocks. And he quoted the episodes. I really loved them. He said, when I used to get home from school, my parents would let me do my homework after. And that was it. I was finished. I was out of that meeting in my head. I was just, what did he just say? The head of the BBC just say he watched my programs when he came home from school?
Me too. Oh, Tim Sullivan, it's been a joy speaking to you. Folks, The Patient is out now, as is The Dentist, The Cyclist. Go grab your copies. And also, if you go to Tim's website, there is a free book that you can download called In the Can, which details some of Tim's adventures in the movie trade. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that so you can download that. Tim Sullivan, thank you so much for speaking to me today, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. It's fascinating, isn't it? Hearing stories about people who have been through the whole screenwriting. Yeah, it's very similar to yours, Mark, as well, isn't it? But
he's a lot more successful.
Well, yeah, well, he's had a little bit longer. You're well on your way, Mister. You're well on your way. But the thing that I love is this idea of how he started his career out by being honest. This idea that he took that risk, didn't he? In that amazing story he told, where he sat in that room with those incredible people and said it how it was.
I mean, how do you tell someone like Derek Jarman? Now, Derek Jarman died way too soon. He was only 52 when he died. It was, he lived not far from here. He lived in Romney in Kent, and he's a local legend and a legend for the, British arts and film. Film director, is an artist. He was a gardener, he was a gay rights activist, did films like Jubilee, Caravaggio, Blue. How do you tell an artist at the top of their game like that your script needs work, mate?
How old was he? He was in his 20s.
Yeah, that takes cojones. And
it does.
Yeah, and good on him, And I think that is never be afraid to, I mean, there's ways of doing that, there's ways of doing it, but never be afraid to point out that, maybe the emperor has no clothes, or maybe a script needs a rewrite, because it's important.
Well, I think in some ways it set Tim up, didn't it, for, being authentic his entire career. And I think these days everyone's a little bit too scared to point something out when it maybe isn't as good as it could be. And yet he proved that they actually, in the back of their mind, were already concerned about that. He basically, he was the confirmation that they needed, and that was the role that he played within that conversation.
Especially in film, everyone lives in fear when making a film, especially if you're a writer, because you can be fired just like that. They'll get another writer in, But someone like Jarman was hugely collaborative. And I think the best people are the ones who listen and take on criticism, take on new ideas, and aren't afraid of that. And in that, the boldness that someone like Jarman shows, I think, has rubbed off on someone like Tim, who can see something like the My Little Pony movie and see an opportunity to discuss themes of racism and propaganda and put it into a children's film. And I know we all say, it goes over the heads of kids. No. Kids are smarter than you think. They know this stuff. They know what's fair and what's unfair and what's wrong and what's right. And they love to see that in their stories.
Well, it's actually where the foundations of all that starts as well. When you've got that beautifully young, elastic mind, that can ready to take in everything. That's the most, or it is the most important time where these types of issues need to be introduced, because in reverse, obviously, we know how it starts. It starts where they're in an environment where the opposite's being fed to them and they're being taught about, to be racist maybe. And so in some ways, I think it's absolutely, because I mean, trying to do that in a movie that an 80-year-old or a 90 or a 100-year-old is watching, there's a limited opportunity of how you're going to shift people in their views. But like a 5-year-old, absolutely, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think as well, what's really interesting is that within that kind of world, I think it reminds us as authors that it's super important to give people permission to tell us what sucks about our book. Because I think too many people give their book to people that they feel safe with. They give their book to a good friend or a family member. You're never going to get an honest feedback in that situation, because the person has to gamble with two things. They're gambling with, do I tell them really what I think about this particular part or the book or what needs changing, and risk the friendship or risk the relationship. That's why people like editors are so important, because yes, they want to obviously build a good relationship with you, but it's a professional relationship built on feedback ultimately. And so for anyone who's been out there, has only got feedback from a very small, safe group of people and wonders why their book's not doing well, that might be an indication that maybe you need to go out and need to give someone permission to say, look, I actually want to know all the things that don't make sense to you, that when you got bored with it, when you stopped reading. And that's what Tim did. And I guess because Tim can do that on other people's work, he's probably very, very good at doing that as he's writing his books as well, and being very honest with his own writing, which probably is why he's been so successful as well.
Yeah, you develop that sort of critical muscle. It takes time, I think, being able to know what your own bad habits are, and but also just to be able to not see criticism as a knockback, but see it as an opportunity to improve and build on what you already have, rather than sort of smashing your toys and going home in a huff. So yeah.
And also, it's for us to remember as well that no matter how far you get in your career and how many years you've been writing and how good your writing gets, even when you're at the top of your game, there are always going to be bad writing days. There's always going to be the script that needs a bit of work on it. And the fact that Derek Jarman was like, authentic enough in himself as well to kind of accept that and say, actually, you're right, and realizing it was only going to make it stronger, probably again why he was such a successful person and all of the endeavors that he did as well.
Yeah. No, incredible man.
Fascinating
incredible stuff. Yeah.
One thing that jumped out for me, and we'll get to My Little Pony in a minute, but Shrek 4, that was a bit of a left fielder. How many Shreks have there been? Have there been 4 Shreks now?
I think there have, and I think that's where they stopped. My son is a bigger Shrek aficionado because he basically grew up with them, and he's got very, very strong opinions. And after I did this interview, I told him that Shrek 4 could have had Sean Connery as Shrek's father. He was so distraught at the missed opportunity that presented, because he's, I think his order goes 2, 3, no, his favourite ones are 2, 1, 3, 4. So he's he's very opinionated, and they mean a lot to that generation of kids as well. Again, they have an effect on those young minds. So yeah, he was gutted, absolutely gutted. But
that would have been a perfect combo, wouldn't it? Though
I know, but that is, as you said, it's the nature of film. To all intents and purposes, the studio is the author of the motion picture, and when they bring a director in, the director is the one essentially in charge, and if they don't want to go in that direction, there's nothing you can do. You have to go with the flow. I mean, at least he was paid. Tim was paid for that work. He developed a working relationship with good people at DreamWorks, which sets you instead for the future as well. So yeah, it's just the way of things. I mean, I was working on something with the Henson Group for a little while, Jim Henson, and it never got as far down the road as that, but it was fun while it lasted, I
can imagine.
and as he said, as a screenwriter, 80% of your work is never seen. You're always working on something that might or might not ever get made. I think as long as you're being paid, I'm all right with that. It's when people ask you to do unpaid work that I can get a bit miffed. So,
although I'll challenge that a tiny bit. Absolutely, getting paid is essential. But imagine somebody and I'm sure there's many people out there that have spent their entire career writing scripts and never had anything made. And you think, if you got to the end of your life and none of your work had ever come out, there would be probably quite a sadness around that. The fact that legacy-wise, it had never actually seen the light of day and nobody even knew that they really existed, do you think?
Yeah, I feel that.
It's a balance in some ways, isn't it? The thing is, it's such a lottery. I mean, I know that we've talked a lot about this over the years, about that kind of having to write and hope that something comes out. But that leads me on to why I think Tim loves what he does now as well. Because it really struck me. I mean, I know we've talked about it, but when you hear about all his stories and then you think about the success that he's had, firstly down the self-publishing route and then publishing, this idea that when you write a book, there's one thing that you can absolutely guarantee, and that book can get published. And there is no one, apart from you as the author, that can prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the magic secret sources of why people write, because they have that control, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, screenwriting, you're right at the bottom of the ladder. So many stars have to align for things to happen. And even then, your script, the actors get hold of it, director gets hold of it, everything changes. I mean, when it works, it's great. It's a wonderful collaborative process and you end up with something wonderful. When it doesn't work, it can be really, really painful. The appeal for Tim of years in the film industry, dancing to other people's tune, to suddenly being able to write his own novel where he has complete control, must be an absolute joy. I mean, yeah, of course, the irony is, he offered it to his agent and his agent turned it down. And then he goes on and makes it an absolute smash hit. So, God, that must have been fun.
In some ways, it's almost the perfect combo. Because I've got to say, there's definitely an allure to screenwriting, even though you mentioned like it's such a lottery in many ways. And so many external factors that can affect whether something actually comes to fruition. But having that combination, having that excitement of that could happen, right? But also writing a book and knowing that this will happen, the combination of those two kind of like, I don't know, it must gives people a bit of an edge. Do you think that?
Welcome to my world.
Well, that's what I was thinking. This is the world you live in. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could just do screenwriting. It's just too depressing. The idea that, most of what you write never sees the light of day. At least I know that I will write stuff and people, because that for me is the ultimate. The fact that people will read it and take some pleasure from it and the words get out there. And that's why you write, for the readers and for for their enjoyment. And so that part of me gets very, very fulfilled, and it's wonderful. And then the screenwriting, the flip side of that is, stuff maybe never ever gets made, but every now and then I've been very lucky. 2 films so far, maybe a third, maybe a TV show. That is the lottery win, I guess. That's kind of, if it happens, it's great. If it doesn't, I've got this thing over here that's scratching that itch for me,
Yeah, because it really does, like, it's writing, and it's where the writing ends up going out into the world ultimately, but it's still writing, whether it's script writing or writing novels. Very different exercise.
You may recall we had another screenwriter on the podcast in our first year. Jo Ho, who was a BAFTA award-winning screenwriter. Yeah. And she took a whole bunch of her old scripts and turned them into novels and novellas, and has done very well, thank you very much. So that's an option as well. Who else did that? Horror writer, Adam G. Neville, I think he did that too. Took a bunch of the old scripts and turned them into novels.
As you've always said, no writing's ever wasted. I mean, exactly. That's the motto, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. Now, one area we do have to talk about, and I think regular listeners would be amiss of me to not bring this up after my 99p rant a couple of weeks ago. Listening to this blows me away. 200,000 free downloaded books. And it's like, I'm sitting there going, interesting. Because in some ways you could say that completely blows my rant out the water, because you can now look at Tim's career and say, that didn't do him any harm. And Queeve actually said as well, didn't he? Queeve MacDonald, our awesome patron, who's incredibly successful author as well, on the BXP team that we have, the private group for authors that we run. He did say as well that he's used the kind of the 99p to get the bolstered. I mean, offering free books, how often does that happen now, would you say? Is that less and less?
No, I think it's quite a common marketing tactic, I think. It's it's that thing of the lost leader, which is, a very well-established marketing premise.
Amazon for the first, 20 years of its life, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, it's, I think if you've got one book, you're a bit stuffed. You don't want to be giving that away for free. But if you've got a series, and now that I'm writing the 4th book of a series, I'm now looking at the Crowfolk and having conversations with my publishers about, okay, how do we use the Crowfolk as a gateway into the rest of the series? I mean, it's already been in a couple of 99p promotions, but then what else can we do with it? I know we're talking to specialist booksellers like The Works. The Works do cheaper versions of the books. There's no laminate or any slightly cheaper paper, but they do it. And again, it's just tapping into markets that might not otherwise do it. Do we do something with the audiobook? Do we, so there's all these conversations going on, and it's something that's, well established in, good old capitalist marketing, give something away.
The thing that's really interesting about that, I guess the experiment that Tim did, where he put it up for free download, and of course he wasn't trying to get 200,000 downloaded. That's just what happened when he put it up there. But I guess within the marketing world as well, we've got this thing called A/B testing, which is where you do, I mean, in a website scenario, it's like you have actually, and a lot of people don't realize this, but if you go to a website and you get served a page, if you refresh the page, you might see an alternative version of it. And it's called A/B testing. It's basically putting statistics like which one was the most successful, and you tweak things. But within this experiment of the 200,000 free books, although Tim did say some of them were bought as well, but having done that, you don't know what would have happened had he have put the book up for sale at $2.99 and it had gone on to sell 200,000 copies or 20,000 copies. So it's really hard to know, would the book have been successful regardless? Because it was obviously a great book. I mean, and that's obviously why it downloaded so many times, that people were downloading it, recommending it. But it's really interesting. It's so hard to know ultimately what would, in any one point in time, what's the best play?
Yeah. Well, drug dealers do it, pornographers do it. You have a little bit for free, then you got to cough up for the rest. It's
talking about your Friday night market.
Allegedly. So I've read on the dark web. So yeah,
But it's just I still feel it just kind of makes my stomach go a bit queasy, the thought of giving away an entire book. I think giving away a short story, giving away a novella, giving away the first couple of chapters, I can get that. Giving away a whole book, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. It's a lot to be letting go of. But brilliant. I mean, it worked for Tim, and it then led him to get his publishing deal as well, which is absolutely phenomenal. So, there's, as you say, there's no for every individual, there's only their way. There's no right or wrong. Yep. What works for one person might not work for someone else. So the most important thing, as we always say on this podcast, is to what? Experiment, to try out, give it a go. Yep. It's the only way you're ever going to learn. So
don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah, absolutely. None of that though. We can't finish this conversation about Tim without chatting a little bit about My Little Pony, Mark. It's so completely left field. Like usually you build a career in that world, writing for kids. You become aware of like the nuances of writing for that type of audience. And yet Tim almost parachuted into that. And
well, there's a certain, when you get enough experience as a screenwriter and you become known in the industry, people will come to you and say, can you come in and fix this script? Can you come in for a week? I think it's even known as weeklies, and the pay on that, very nice. Thank you very much. Really, really good pay. Now, not anyone can do it. It's a real skill to sort of jump into something that's already written, probably already in production. Everyone's panicking because the train has left the station, the ship is out to sea, and they've realised that there's a leak and someone has to fix the leak. And it's a particular kind of skill. One I'd like to develop. Thank you very much. And you come in and you work for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and you try and fix that script, and you get paid a lot of money for it. And you don't always get credit. You don't. Someone like William Goldman used to do that a lot. Carrie Fisher used to do that a lot. Carrie Fisher is an uncredited screenwriter on many of your favorite films, and they would come in and punch stuff up, and then off they go. So I think Tim is one of those people who's worked. You look at his IMDb page, and he's worked in all kinds of genres. And he did say that even he was surprised by My Little Pony. But I guess because he'd worked on Shrek 4, they thought, oh, animation, he's done animation, let's get him in.
That's the link, yeah.
Yeah. So and he saw an opportunity to do something, to have some fun with it and put in some really interesting themes. And I think, as we said, people appreciate that. And it's weird. I had a call with my agent earlier, and we were talking about my brand as a screenwriter and the fact that I've written all sorts of weird stuff, and there seems to be no rhyme or reason, which he's fretting about. I'm fine with it, So it's kind of, it's fine. I can write anything, because as far as I'm concerned, story is story. I'd love to work on a My Little Pony movie. I'd love to work on a Derek Jarman movie. Can you imagine two, more different projects?
Extreme, yeah.
So, as far as I'm concerned, story is story. But yeah, the whole brand thing is something when your agent is trying to sell you to people, then it's, especially when you're kind of starting out, it can be really difficult. But good on him.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It reminds me of those, do you hear about these consultants that come into businesses when they're struggling, or they're about to go bankrupt, or they've got some major problem, and they bring in this kind of guy that, guy or gal that basically can like sort everything out, get everyone working together again, and get everything back on track. And they make documentaries about that. So it makes absolute sense that people like that exist. But it does feel like you have to get to the top of your game in order to be able to do that well.
Well, I'm reading a fantastic book about the making of Mad Max Fury Road.
That was a great movie.
Oh, it's
wasn't
amazing.
Wasn't
movie.
that? Yeah. Loved it.
It was, and it took decades to get made. And they didn't actually have a script. They had storyboards. They actually sacked the scriptwriter quite early on. And George Miller had storyboards. The whole thing was storyboarded. But when the actors started coming on board, they hired, they got Kelly Marcel, who's a fantastic screenwriter. She worked on the Saving Mr. Banks. Was that Kelly Marcel? Yes, Saving Mr. Banks film. And she came in and worked with the actors and did all the backstory. And so you can get screenwriters jumping in at certain points, to essentially, G a film along. And it's a really good book, actually. I think it's called Blood, Sweat and Chrome. And the guys that interviewed everyone who worked on the film. It's one of the best making of books I've read in recent times. So yeah, it does happen. It's all the fun and the fair.
It is, absolutely. I remember seeing that film, seems like a distant memory now, in the cinema, that thing that we used to go to quite regularly. And I just remember like the movie finishing, it felt like one of the Bourne movies. It's like from the moment the opening credits started to the end, it was
relentless.
It was like being on a roller coaster, and I was absolutely exhausted, and I'd been sitting on my butt the whole time. And I just looked at, and I went with two of my guy friends, because we were like, we couldn't drag the ladies out, unfortunately. But we just sat there and we all just looked at each other and we just like puffed our cheeks out like, wow. We didn't get up and rush out. We just sat there for 5 minutes just to kind of come down from that. If you ever get a chance to see it in the cinema, it is just with the music as well, absolutely brilliant. Didn't expect that going in. I was like, whoa, absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, thank you so much to Tim for sharing his time with us and for being such a great sport and sharing some of those incredible, inspiring stories. And
just to say, this is my tie-in copy of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes. This is my first Sherlock Holmes novel, The Sign of Four, and that's Jeremy Brett on the cover there. And this was published 1987, so I was 14? Yeah. This edition first published 1890. So yeah, that got me into Sherlock Holmes. That was a big moment for me. Really, really big moment for this. We've got the DVD set of that. Those. They were on ITV, I think, in the UK, if I remember. They were, Granada. And they were TV, and everyone listening to this, they're going, "Oh, Sherlock! Yeah, I've seen the Sherlock. It's not the Benedict Cumberbatch one. It's not. It's not the most recent BBC adaptations, which are absolutely fantastic. This was like the proper. What was when was this, in the 70s or 80s? No, 87. 87. 80s. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if you want to go back to some of the real original Sherlock Holmes just TV, dig out those. And if you want to hear more of Tim's adventures in the movie trade, he did have a free book, but he's put them all up as blog posts. It's called In the Can, and I'll put a link in the show notes because they're really refreshingly honest and very funny. There's some really, really good stuff in there. Michael Douglas, lovely person from all accounts. I was just reading one of his entries today. So do check that out. Link in the show notes. Brilliant stuff. So, Mr. Stay, social media. What's been happening this week on the social media front? Good stuff. So, Kate Baker, who I bumped into at the London Book Fair, she's at Bleu Viola on Twitter. She says, "I found an edible way to celebrate 100 days in a row on the 200 words a day challenge." And she's done this wonderful cake, 200 words a day. It's sprinkled on the cake. It was very, very yummy. Far too many calories for me, Kate. But I really, really hope you enjoyed it. And congratulations on hitting your 100-day streak, doing the 200 words a day challenge. Congrats on that. That is a milestone. 100 days. I mean, 7 days initially is a milestone, but 100 days. That is the start of great things. So congratulations, Kate. Well done. Emanuela Decanor, who supports us on Patreon and is part of the Bestseller Experiment group on Facebook. She says, "Hi, everyone. I'm still in rejection land, but I wanted to post that I had a poem published in the Visual Verse April edition that aims to raise funds for Ukrainian poets. They called out for other writers who had been through war or upheaval, so I wrote about the revolution in Ghana." She says it's dark, but if you don't mind that, take a look. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this. It is dark stuff, but really, really powerful. And Emanuela coming from a place of truth and honesty there. That's really moving to read. So do check that out, folks.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's in the show notes. Really, really powerful. Elizabeth Hurley, again, big supporter on Patreon and member of the BXP group. She says, fabulous news. 2 rejections. So why is this good news? Because they both gave detailed feedback and they both agreed with each other on all points. This is fabulous as it gives me something to work on. So, that's
great.
That's, 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. But yeah, that's great. Congratulations on that, Elizabeth. It's always good to get.
That's the kind of spirit that I love to see. We see it in the academy, we see it in the team, and we want all our listeners to, if that's not the way that you approach things, we always say rejection is a badge of honor, and it means you're putting it out there, you get rejected. It doesn't mean your career's ended. It means that those 2 companies aren't going to go with you, but the third one probably will when you take on board that feedback. So brilliant, Elizabeth. Really, really good attitude.
And a lovely bit of news from Molly Gimmel, another Patreon supporter in the BXP group as well. She says, hi, folks. I know most of the people in this group write fiction, but I wanted to share that I just published my first non-fiction book on women and leadership. I'm so excited. And the book is called Master Your Mindset, How Women Leaders Step Up. And I checked just before we went to record this today, and Master Your Mindset has one of those lovely #1 bestseller flags on Amazon. So Molly, huge congrats on not only on publishing your book, but on becoming a bestseller on Amazon. Fantastic.
That is absolutely brilliant. Congratulations. And actually on that note, Mark, we've got another BXP team member and Academy member celebrating this week, because Tammy Mercer Gervais was part of a compilation series that released in Canada. It went worldwide, but on Kindle in Canada, the compilation book hit #1. Not just in the genres, but across the entire country.
Wow.
And Tammy's been working so hard, and Tammy's great. Tammy's so humble about these things that she's not shouting out about it, which is why I'm doing it here for her, because that's what we're about, right? But just massive congratulations to Tammy on that. We know when we get to know people intimately, kind of in the academy, we get to kind of know their journey. We get to know the duration, the struggles, the highs, the lows. We really get to know you as authors. And so for me, this gives me massive pleasure to celebrate this with everyone, because Tammy's worked so hard at this. I've been on a number of actual writing retreats with Tammy over the years as well. And for her to get to this point in her career, it's just the beginning, and brilliant. So may that inspire all of you as well who've been working away at this for a number of years. To get that kind of feedback and success is mind-blowing. So congratulations.
Really is. Folks, if you've got any good news, get in touch. Drop us a line. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. Or you can find us on social media. We're Bestseller Experiment on Facebook and at BestsellerXP on Twitter and Instagram. And if you've enjoyed this show, if you've been inspired, give us a rating or a review, or at the very least, just subscribe, because we're here to stay, folks. We come up to 400 episodes this year. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep going, aren't we, Mr. D?
Absolutely. And if you need an excuse, if you want to eat more cake in your life, be like Kate and start the 200-word challenge. Can you get to 7 days? That's all. It's don't set big goals like 1,000 days or 100 days. Can you just get to 7 days of consecutive writing every day for a minimum of 200 words? The way to do it is to sign up to the free 200-word challenge. It's at 200wordchallenge.com. And then if you would like to take your writing to the next level, if you would like to really up your game, get massive accountability, get coaching, do many courses that we've got on the Academy, join Mark and I at the Bestseller Academy. It's simply academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mr. Stay, thank you so much for your time. You're often enjoying a bit of musical entertainment tonight, I believe. I hope you enjoy this, and everyone else. If you're getting out, I was seeing an artist on Sunday, and it's like, we're going to go to a concert. It's
great. I'm going to see the Bootleg Beatles tonight. I hear they've got a new George Harrison, so I want to check that out. And I'm also going to be at EasterCon over the Easter weekend, so I hope to see lots of friends there, and I'll give you a full report next week.
I look forward to it. Brilliant stuff. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.